Well, welcome, Seema, and welcome back from Davos.
Thank you. How are you? Davos was great.
I am sure I want to hear a little bit more about it. I hear bits and pieces from friends and colleagues and relationships that have come back. And as I mentioned, it's the first time we've missed in a while. We were even at the last one, which was the summer one or spring, whatever you want to call it, which in some ways doesn't have the aura of the winter, but it's still a lot easier to pack for.
Yeah, agreed. Very much so.
So,
Yeah,
but
I was talking to somebody, in January and just this past month, and they were saying that they didn't like the summer one as much, and that's partly because it didn't have the same vibe. And as you said, the climate plays a big role in it, in the sense that you're cold, you're like trying to get into a place and be with other people.
right.
You're not like hanging out on the streets. And so what ends up happening is that because of the cold weather, you can't go anywhere. You're forced to be together and collaborate and work on things together.
Well, somebody finally figured out how to get people to collaborate.
Yes, exactly.
That's so it has to be cold where you're stuck together to collaborate.
That's right.
No, I know it does have a different vibe, and although we did like one part we did like about the summer one, without going too far off track here, is that there was less people, so we were able to talk more to specific people, and
Yeah.
so but there's pros and cons to everything. So first, if you wouldn't mind, if you could briefly introduce yourself, more like not the business as much to start with, but where you're from, where you are now, your family. I joke around with people saying something you've never told anybody ever that you want to reveal now. We can do that too if you want, but just share a little bit.
Yeah, no, I'm Seema Kumar. I just joined this organization called Cure, an exciting place to be, as the chief executive officer. And I joined here after having worked at J&J, Johnson & Johnson, for about 20 years. And then before that, NIH, Broad Institute, Whitehead Institute, and Hopkins. So, it sort of is wonderful to be here and to bring all of the different places where I've worked and gained wonderful experiences, to pull it all together in one, position in a exciting new place like Cure, in the center and the heart of New York City. So it's really wonderful. I live in Princeton, so I'm still taking the train, commuting, from home. And actually, at first I thought that was going to be a trek, and it's a bit of a trek, but I love it because early in the morning, I take the train. It's it's an express train, but most people are either sleeping or the train is kind of empty because I leave early in the morning, and that gives me time to center myself and browse the web, return a few calls, and send a few emails. And then I get back home in the evenings, and then it's back to sort of a little bit of the quiet, bucolic countryside kind of a place where it's nice to get away from the hubbub and again center yourself. And my husband and I live there, and then our son lives in Philadelphia. So, that's why it's also nice to be in Princeton, because we bribe him with the offers of taking him out to really nice restaurants and Michelin star restaurants so that we can go see him. And so that's a nice middle, between Philadelphia and New York City.
Oh, so that's the art of parenting.
Yes, that is the art of parenting.
Bribery. I got
bribery with good food and a nice meal. Yes.
No, that's fantastic. The train, I used to take the quiet train from Boston to New York when a lot of stuff going on in Boston, and it was delightful. It's better seats than the plane, if you will, unless you're in first class all the time, and it's just so calming in some ways, and especially you're an early morning person too. So I can see how that can be a good time to just get focused and stuff. So what were you like as a kid, as a teenager? Were you playing doctor or nurse? Were you writing stories? Were you doing science projects? What were you doing?
I was doing a lot of different things. I've never really understood how to describe my varied interests in multiple different things ever before, until I ran across some people who told me I was a polymath. And I said, and for a minute, I sat back and I thought to myself, okay, maybe, maybe I am, maybe I'm not, but that gets closer to describing why and explaining why I have multiple interests in different things, and can do a little bit of also code switching in a good way. And so I think that there is a part of it that is even multicultural. So for example, tonight I can go back home, change into my Indian attire, and go to an Indian festival and talk a different language and sing Bollywood songs. And, that's a different Seema.
No, I love that. Hey, talk about diversity, right? That's what it's all about.
Yeah. But, so you can have interest in physics and in science, but at the same time, you can be a storyteller and love making movies and writing blogs, and so it's in the old days, you could do that, but then as specialization became more and more important, people started specializing. But I think that now we live in a omni-channel kind of world, and I think having different interests and is great, and which is why I love being here at Cure, because there's all kinds of it's the cross-pollination of different disciplines and different sectors that makes it such an exciting place to be.
Yeah, I can totally get that based on what we do with so many different sectors and people too, and it's very interesting what you can bring from one to another. That's valuable, and knowledge is incredible power, or just value, I should say. And so, is that what intrigued you to do dual majors then? All the things you've done, in science communications and journalism.
Yeah, at first I thought I was indecisive, but that's not the case, because I think I found myself at a point in undergraduate at University of Maryland, thinking to myself, okay, I have to choose, but I can't. How do I choose? I have an interest in both. And my husband, of all people, he's a professor, so maybe that's why he was able to see this that I wasn't. He said, have you checked out this? They have a department called interdisciplinary studies. And I said, oh, really? And he said, yeah, it looks like you can construct your own major. You can take courses from here and there, and you don't have to choose between majoring in one versus the other. So I immediately set up a meeting with them, talked to them, and lo and behold, I was able to sort of do that kind of combination studies, which I think is what led me to this sort of very different type of a career path. Most people told me, I think the moment they saw my name was Kumar, and even my own people in my own community thought I was a little gone, a little, off the whatever, because off the rocker, because they thought I was throwing away my life, because computer programming was what everybody did.
Right.
And yeah. And even now I get spam mail, because my last name is Kumar, with people reaching out to me about IT capabilities.
Yeah, well, it's about time we got rid of stereotypes and moved on. It's so interesting to say, because when we founded Fifth Element, it was based on the premise that business and their business leaders and their businesses can do way better when they're doing good. So you clearly were a leader in innovation and communications at J&J, and they're a leader in global health. Can you describe what that was like, doing both in a corporate like that, the depth of engagement you had in so many disciplines, science, media, business, community, and then also what the challenge and opportunity was of the pandemic, when you had to balance economics and doing good, like creating a vaccine, for example?
Yeah, I mean, what was wonderful was, Johnson & Johnson is, an extraordinarily wonderful company. And, it's the largest healthcare company. And it has a lot of heart. And so we were going through many different periods where, oncology, there was a lot going on in oncology. There was a lot going on in immunology. And so first it was like research and development and trying to make sure that we were investing in research and development, but with a focus on starting with the patient's need and then finding the best science instead of the opposite. So that you go search for the best science after you know what is a gap that the patient is experiencing. And so that, I think that strategy actually really worked wonders. That was one. And then we also realized that, and I think this was part of our infectious diseases franchise and HIV, which we had been working on in those early days, that you have to make sure that there are many patients with HIV in sub-Saharan Africa, and that you can't, with good conscience, have extraordinary treatments here for patients and not worry about patients, there. And so we came up with innovative models through which we could, make access, possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and on. But we also, I think one of the other things that we realized as a company is that, you may be the largest healthcare company, but you don't necessarily need to own the monopoly, or you don't have to. I mean, not every idea comes always from yourself or within your own walls.
Right.
And so to be agnostic to where the best idea comes from, and to say a good idea is a good idea is a good idea. And doing that, I think, was also led to the launch of the innovation centers and the J Labs. And, so all of that. And then you asked me about the vaccine. Both when Ebola happened and Zika happened, and then finally when COVID-19 happened, we jumped fearlessly to the front lines to say, okay, we have a vaccine platform and we can, come to the aid. And so, so it was the pandemic. I think most people would describe it this way. It was the best of times and worst of times, in the sense that we were all under lockdown. But it was also very fulfilling for many of us who were working on this to say that we're working day and night, we're working remotely, we're all sort of locked up in our houses, but we're working on something, great. So that sense of purpose, the sense of mission, I think, is what it's all about. And, it's kind of, it can take you places. It can make you grow, like you even, beyond your own expectations of yourself. And mission can help you go, travel farther than anything else can.
Yeah, it's super well put, because it's interesting when we have less distraction and more focus on that mission, or the ability to think and pause and think a little bit about strategically doing stuff rather than just doing things. I think the pandemic taught us some of that. I think it also taught us that we can be serious but not take ourselves so seriously all the time.
Yep.
And in the sense of, if you're doing an interview and a dog walks in or a kid walks in, it's not the end of the world anymore.
Yep.
And that's a simple thing too. The fourth industrial revolution is about technology and innovation, and the fifth, it pretty well has become about humanity, which is one of the reasons we're named, actually, as well as SDG 5 about women, because we were launched that way. But so we always focus on impact and talent, on how it comes together, which includes innovation, to really have sustainable results. I know at J&J, but now certainly as the CEO of Cure, you're definitely leading the effort, I believe, to improve the healthcare ecosystem. And you're bringing people together in what I think you described really well, in a divisive and fragmented world. Can you tell us all about the exciting opportunity at Cure? What are you looking to do? And I love the fact that you address it as, like, speaking of mission, what ails us?
Mm-hmm. Yes. it's funny because on the one hand, there is so much happening in the scientific arena. There's an explosion of opportunities, breakthroughs, coming through. And I think that where there isn't that much shortage of good ideas or breakthroughs at all. Where there is a shortage of or ideas for how to take those breakthroughs and reach much larger swaths of people so that you can create healthy societies, right? And what happens is that the system, the entire healthcare ecosystem to some degree has gotten so fragmented that instead of looking at it from a innovator's perspective, if you look at it from a patient's perspective, it is kind of like walking through a maze where you don't know whether you're going to find the path out or what's going to meet you around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, how do you streamline that for people? How does the innovator work with the healthcare provider, work with the reimbursement payer ecosystem or stakeholder to say, okay, how does it look? If you line it all up end to end, how can we make it much more like a, throughway rather than it being full of bumps and, all of the obstacles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. It kind of relates a little bit to what you said about the time during the pandemic. Have a mission and you know where to go type of thing. So you bring parties together. Talk a little bit more about that, because you got like you said, a diversity of healthcare innovators and people in your facility, in your building. Tell us a little bit about how that all comes together.
Yeah, and we're still working on it, right? So part of it is that we now have the building blocks of first of all a place and also a vision and a mission, and we're starting to bring people together. But the goal really would be, as they say, it takes a village to to bring up a child, right?
Or a bribe.
Or yeah, exactly, right. But it takes a community, or it can take here it takes an entire ecosystem to come together.
Right.
So we're sort of well on our way with the very good defined vision, and we have some exciting new initiatives that are coming down the pike. But we're not waiting for all of that to completely, be in place before we get going on initiating that dialogue. Mm-hmm. And so part of it is the conversation, and then leading to outcomes. So those are the 3 steps I see. The conversation has begun, and now we're going to get to really the action. What do we need to do? And then, how do we create outcomes that are measurable? It's not an overnight thing, but we have to try and we have to make it happen.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's not an overnight thing, but you can plan forever and never do anything, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you do have to go ahead. One thing I did want to ask you: we're doing a lot of work, obviously in healthcare, but also in food security and or insecurity, if you will, and have an initiative. It's a 10-year initiative of changing that whole ecosystem too. And healthcare is a big part of that. Sometimes people don't realize that. They think it's just feeding and that's it, because it includes nutrition and mental health, equal access, health equity, everything. What's your experience and thoughts about that critical global challenge and how healthcare fits into changing the ecosystem of food security?
Yeah, I mean, there is a couple of things, a couple of areas, right? So first of all, in a very small but meaningful way, in our Cure facility, we also have our own cafeteria / catering and kitchen. It's a gourmet. We have a trained chef from the Culinary Institute of America who's a chef. and a whole team. And, so not just about the daily breakfast, lunch, but also all of the events that we do here are all catered, here. And as we look at that, and as we look at, what's happening even in restaurants in New York City and food, I think you've heard about the eggs shortage now because of the avian flu, right?
Right.
So there is that going on, and then you see that there is probably the cost of food and the supply chain, has been rising overall. And then the third thing is the labor with all post pandemic has been, a little bit more challenging arena. So if you take all of that, and if you take the fact that here we're talking about a developed country ecosystem, but if you think about what's happening in places where the countries are not yet fully developed, you can imagine where there's a lot of issues related to food security. There are food deserts, right? Where and health deserts, and there are many of those. And in fact, right here in New York City, there are areas where there is food security and food deserts and health deserts. And I know that there have been a lot of community work that's been ongoing in food kitchens and other areas to make sure that these things are being solved. But putting all that aside on a day-to-day basis, in the future, I think technology will hold the answer for us. And innovation is what it requires. And the technology, by technology, I also mean biotechnology and, supply chain technology and blockchain and other things that will help us aid, and solve this problem.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. For example, we're doing a lot in food waste, and it's technology that's minimizing the food waste, that's able to get food to people to survive and whatnot. There's also a company we work with that does digital diagnostics for retinal therapy or whatever is described to identify diabetes. And then what nutrition do you have to have so you got technology combining with nutrition. There's so many areas that I think are important, and without the food security, we're working in survival mode. There's not much creativity, and it impacts the future big time.
But also, I think that there is hope there because I know that there are a lot of people working on CRISPR gene editing technology to figure out a way to kind of look at agricultural bio, and how to use technology in ag bio to look at in the future solving the problem of food security. And of course, that's all completely and utterly connected to sustainability and the environment.
Totally. Yeah.
And so is health. And so it's all interconnected. So you need the food, you need the energy, you need and when I say energy, I mean fuel and sustainable energy, and the environment, and the climate change solutions, all of they're all which is connected to health, and they're all interconnected. So that's why I think holistic approaches will help, compared to you can solve for one part of the equation, but then you're still stuck if you don't look at the whole.
Without a doubt, and that's why these initiatives are long term, and even education obviously becomes a big part to what parents are engaging with their kids about. What's being taught in school. We have one client that is using technology and education to change the food system in schools and teach the kids about that as well. So you're right on. There's a clash of ecosystems that comes together, to hopefully solve all this. How do you find? You mentioned energy before. How do you find the talent energy going in the healthcare arena these days?
I think that the talent landscape is actually evolving. And I think the next generation is probably well poised to attack healthcare and address healthcare through a combination of technology, biotechnology, medical technology in a systemic way. So I think that from a talent's perspective, I think the future is bright. We need to make sure that we are recognizing that and that we're not using old frameworks to evaluate our needs for the future.
Yeah, I totally agree. We're doing a lot in that realm with talent and younger people that even if it's a specialization wanting to get into a certain area of healthcare / technology because they want to make a difference and they want to be involved in tech. So I think you're right on there. One question off that beat a little bit, but I want to ask you. You know, Fifth Element was launched almost 5 years ago now on International Women's Day because we were doing another reason for our fifth name, SDG 5. And we engage obviously with a lot of leaders who care, not to be cute, but we that's the clients we look to work with. And every search is about diversity and impact, etc. Can you describe your journey as a woman in business? You mentioned it before, your last name, they think you're IT or something. So you're in life sciences, you're in the tech center. How did you navigate and how did you thrive, including getting engaged in positions that you can work on big projects type of thing?
Yeah, I think there is a part that is you, and then there's a part that is the system. And so so you both have to work. So there are things within you that you can work on, and you can improve both your attitude as well as your skill sets and your learning and your continuous learning and work ethic and all of that. But there's an aspect of the system that also needs to work, which is inclusive, is open to diverse ideas, has mentorship and sponsorship and the right environment and the right fit with the right talent, right? If both work, then, it's a virtuous cycle. And I found for me, just lucky, I suppose, that both sides worked. And I was able to find mentors in my entire life who are great champions who recognized, the real talent, and that was good. And the second part was from my end, and many of them were not always women, and many of them were not always people of Indian origin. Many of my mentors were white males. And so, male ambassadors are really important for women to succeed, and they need to make the space, and give the mentorship, but also the championship, and sponsorship, as we say. Like, the sponsor is the one who talks wonderfully about you when you're not in your room.
Right.
and promotes you and says, you got to look at her because she's great. That's who a sponsor is. Whereas a mentor is more somebody who sits down with you on a cup of coffee and says, okay, this, maybe you can look at doing this, or you can look at doing that. You need a little bit of both, but I think ultimately the sponsorship matters. What you can do for yourself is, one of the things I didn't know that this consciously, but subconsciously, I realized that, I'm different. And, you can take it from a diversity standpoint, you can take it skill set standpoint, you can take it from a culture standpoint, you can take it as a woman standpoint. I'm different when I walk into a room. And I have one of two choices. When I walk into a room and I'm different and I don't look or act or feel like anybody else in the room, I have one of two choices. I can kind of retreat into my shell and or I can say, okay, I have everybody's attention in the room, and let me, let me speak my voice. And so that's one. The second thing is, learning, and this, sometimes you can even learn something from your own child. and my son, when he was young, he would be playing this, and he lost to another person, and then he would say, "Mom, he just played really well. I mean, he's such a great talent." And to me, I was like, wow, recognizing somebody else's talent and trying to learn from them and appreciate them is important. And so you don't always have to be the smartest person in the room. You don't need to be the most talented individual in the room. But if you surround yourself and you're amongst talented people, sometimes you don't even know how talented they are, but you learn something from everybody. And if you're open to learning and open to kind of like let the universe teach you what's important, then I think, that continuous learning helps a lot.
Wow, that's actually brilliant. And champions are needed, not just mentors. You're right. And I think when you open yourself up to respecting that other talented person, you'll receive so much from that person, because they'll really want to, and they'll appreciate it too. So it is what we call an omni-win, if you will, for everybody there. So yeah, thank you for that. That was amazing. Last question I want to ask you on this is, in you may have heard me say this before. In 2021, one of my clients said, Mark, the year 2020 was the year that flew by slowly. And it was a total, I don't know if to call that an oxymoron or whatever, but the last 3 years that have been really amazing in different ways, what are you most grateful for? And then also, what are you most hopeful for?
Well, 2020 was the first year ever in my entire lifetime, my husband's lifetime, and our son's lifetime, that three of us were together for one full year almost, having every meal together, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and playing pool downstairs in our basement. Had never spent that much time together as a family, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm also grateful that I was able to work on, be part of the team, I should say, that worked day in and day out on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And so, the fulfillment of being able to work on, a solution and being sort of every day on it was extraordinary. And, we created also a educational program to teach people what vaccines were all about, because we had forgotten basic immunology, basically how vaccines work. And so it was like a teachable moment. What I am most hopeful about is, I think, between technology, the next generation, new talent, and, wonderful people, the world is in a great place. I know that every day you turn on the television and there is, really distressing news.
Right.
And that is the reality that happens. Fortunately, even though you may or may not always see it on television, on your everyday life, you meet incredible people, and who are doing incredible things. And so I think there is still hope, and there is still incredible talent out there that are making the world a better place, every single moment of the time.
Yeah, I totally agree. And well said. We just are completing a search for the Chief Executive Officer of the National Women's History Museum. And I have met, I'm not surprised the amount of amazing women doing amazing things I've met. I'm just amazed at how many there are.
Yes.
And so it is inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing that, and being on our Leaders Who Care series.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate it. And all the best. And it's wonderful to have such a series called Leaders Who Care. It's a great program. Thank you.
Thank you.